May 19th, 2022, Mexico City. A mother's phone rings, an unknown number. She picks up, expecting to hear her daughter's voice on the other end. Instead, a woman screaming, then dead silence. The call cuts out. Nadia Barrales calls her daughter back immediately. Straight to voicemail, every time. 30 minutes later, someone's at her door. It's her son-in-law, alone. No sign of her daughter Karen, no sign of her 4-year-old grandson. And here's the part that stops her cold. He's calm. Too calm. He tells her Karen's gone missing and asks if maybe she's here. His story doesn't hold up, not for a second. Because Karen had no reason to be anywhere near where he claims she went that morning. And that's just the first crack in a story that's about to completely fall apart. If you're into true crime documentaries that dig into real cases most people have never heard of, this is exactly the kind of channel you want to stick around for. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and hit subscribe, because we're covering true crime cases like this one every single week. What starts as a missing persons case in Mexico City is about to expose something far more disturbing. A house full of secrets, a family determined to protect itself no matter the cost, and a 4-year-old boy who becomes the only witness left to tell the truth. Let's stick to the facts. Karen Itzel was 26 years old. She worked for the local borough government, and her life ran on a schedule you could set a clock to. She and her mother, Nadia, spoke every single day, every morning, every evening on her way home from work. That Thursday, Karen was supposed to swing by her mother's place after her shift with her husband, Jose Luis, and their 4-year-old son, Naim. She never showed up. When Jose Luis finally appeared at Nadia's door, alone, his explanation was that Karen had gone to campus early that morning, around 7 a.m., to drop off her thesis with her professors at the National Polytechnic Institute. Here's the problem with that story. It doesn't hold together for more than a few minutes once you check the facts. Karen had already finished her degree. 6 days earlier, on May 13th, she'd officially completed her dental program. There was no thesis left to deliver. No reason to be on that campus at all. When Nadia pushed back and demanded to know where her grandson Naim was, Jose Luis dodged the question entirely. He just said he'd head home and wait for Karen to turn up. Nadia wasn't willing to sit around and hope. She and other family members went straight to the university that same night, checking security logs, walking the grounds, even searching maintenance tanks. Nothing. Not a single trace of Karen anywhere. The next day, things got even stranger. Jose Luis picked up the official missing person bulletin from authorities. But when he brought it to Nadia's house, he kept it hidden behind his back. When Nadia finally got her hands on it, she couldn't believe what she was reading. The description didn't match Karen at all. Wrong build, wrong eyes, glasses Karen had never worn in her life. The man responsible for describing his own wife to police had somehow described a completely different woman. Was that a mistake? Or was he trying to send the search in the wrong direction entirely? When Nadia confronted him, Jose Luis barely reacted. He shrugged it off, blaming a clerical error by government staff. Meanwhile, investigators started their standard sweep of the neighborhood. They noticed a security camera mounted right outside the family's front gate, pointed directly at the entrance. When officers asked about it, Jose Luis's father answered immediately, insisting the camera had been broken for years and didn't work. Investigators didn't argue. They played along. But the moment the family wasn't watching, detectives quietly pulled the memory card anyway. The camera worked perfectly, and the footage from the early morning hours of May 19th didn't just contradict everything Jose Luis had told them. It gave investigators their very first real look inside the world Karen had actually been living in. After reviewing what they found, detectives moved away from the idea that Karen had been the victim of some random street crime. If they wanted answers, they needed to look much closer at the people closest to her, starting with the man who could calmly go about his day while half the neighborhood searched for his missing wife. Jose Luis Palomares was 7 years older than Karen, and at the National Polytechnic Institute, he'd built a reputation as a perpetual student, someone who failed even basic exams year after year. In fact, the only reason he ever earned his dental license at all was because of Karen. She wrote his entire graduation thesis herself, start to finish. It's worth sitting with that for a second, how far someone will go to reshape the story of their own life. Outside the house, Jose Luis played the part of someone else entirely. At work, he told coworkers he was single, legally divorced. That lie served one purpose: covering up an affair he was having with Karen's direct supervisor. And Karen's home life was just as far from what it looked like on the surface. The couple didn't have a place of their own. They lived in a small partitioned room on the first floor of a two-story house, the rest of it occupied by Jose Luis's extended family. Under one roof, his parents, his brother Enrique, and Enrique's wife Valeria, plus his sister and her family. It was a crowded household with strict, unspoken rules. Karen and Jose Luis only had access to one small bathroom downstairs, while the rest of the family used the larger one upstairs. The person who ran that household was Jose Luis's mother, Marta Beatriz, ironically a psychologist who worked for a local government agency. Inside her own home, though, she reportedly kept everyone under constant control, down to something as small as when Karen was allowed to use water to wash clothes. There was no one there to protect her. Karen's own father had passed away suddenly, just a month before her wedding. After that, Karen and Nadia built a routine to stay close, calling twice a day, sharing their locations with each other constantly. In that house, her mother was the one person Karen could really rely on. As investigators kept digging, neighbors came forward with something disturbing from years earlier. Before Karen, Jose Luis had lived with another partner in that same house. Neighbors remembered loud arguments through the fence. Then one day, she was simply gone. The Palomares family's explanation back then was simple. She'd packed up and moved back to her hometown for good. No relative ever filed a missing person report. She just faded from the neighborhood's memory. That old buried incident forced investigators to reconsider everything about Karen's disappearance. If this family had pulled something like this off once before without consequence, they'd likely feel untouchable the second time around. Detectives knew they couldn't tip their hand yet, so they came up with a plan. They asked Nadia to keep playing the part of the grieving, unsuspecting mother, giving no indication that investigators were quietly closing in. While investigators quietly worked behind the scenes, Nadia was playing her own difficult role out in the open. On May 20th, she and other relatives spent the day putting up missing person flyers across the neighborhood. Jose Luis, meanwhile, refused to let Karen's friends post any flyers near his own property, claiming he didn't want to draw unwanted attention from the neighbors. Does that sound like the behavior of a devastated husband? It only got stranger from there. Later that day, officers showed up at the Palomares family home for a routine check, but the gates were locked. When Nadia found out, she called Jose Luis. He picked up right away, and at that exact moment, while dozens of people were out searching the city for his missing wife, he was casually playing soccer at a nearby field. That calm wasn't an accident. Jose Luis believed he'd already steered suspicion away from himself. The day before, he'd given investigators a strange, unprompted statement, describing Nadia as difficult and hostile, claiming she and Karen fought constantly. He gently nudged detectives toward looking at Karen's own mother instead. It worked for a little while. Because of what Jose Luis told them, investigators brought Nadia in for a tense round of questioning. But instead of getting defensive, Nadia simply unlocked her phone and set it on the table. What investigators found scrolling through years of messages wasn't conflict. It was hundreds of daily good morning texts, constant check-ins, years of quiet devotion. That kind of digital history isn't something you fake after the fact. In that moment, detectives realized exactly who'd been lying to them, and Nadia became one of their most valuable allies in the case. By May 24th, the pressure had built to a breaking point. Jose Luis started to suspect Nadia was working with investigators, asking questions that were getting too specific. So he tried to solve that problem himself. He called her, pushing hard for them to meet and search together in a remote area called San Gregorio Atlapulco, even offering to pick her up with several relatives. What he didn't know was that Nadia was sitting inside the investigator's office when that call came through. Her phone was on speaker, and the entire team listened as their main suspect tried to lure the key witness in his own case out to an isolated location under a completely made-up pretext. That trip never happened. Investigators decided they had seen enough. With a search warrant in hand, forensic teams entered the Palomares family home. Right away, something felt off. The house was unnaturally clean, and the smell of chemical cleaner hung thick in the air. Technicians covered the windows and sprayed luminol throughout the property. Almost instantly, multiple surfaces lit up bright blue. Extensive traces of blood, carefully scrubbed away, turned up in two places: the small bathroom downstairs and the larger bathroom upstairs. But now detectives had a much bigger problem. The entire house was empty. Jose Luis, his parents, his brother and sister-in-law, every member of that household, gone. And most alarming of all, 4-year-old Naeem was gone with them, the only witness who might know exactly what happened inside those walls. The following day, May 25th, investigators tracked down and arrested Jose Luis. Once he was in custody, his original story, Karen leaving at dawn to deliver a thesis, had already completely fallen apart. So he started inventing new versions on the spot, changing his account over and over during questioning. First, he claimed Karen had simply slipped in the bathroom, hit her head, and died by accident, and that his family panicked and covered it up. Then he switched, saying she'd been accidentally pushed during an argument. By the end of the interview, he'd landed on a third version, claiming Karen had attacked him first, and he'd only used force to defend himself. It's remarkable how fast a story unravels once real evidence is sitting on the table. But even as he admitted to some involvement, Jose Luis refused to answer the two questions that actually mattered. Where was 4-year-old Naeem? And where was Karen? At that point, detectives didn't need a confession anymore. They shifted to traffic analysis, reviewing terabytes of surveillance footage across the city to trace the route of a white pickup truck belonging to Jose Luis's father. That footage showed the truck heading late on the night of May 19th toward an isolated stretch of Xochimilco, the exact same remote area Jose Luis had tried to lure Nadia to days later under a fake pretense. On the morning of May 26th, search teams arrived at that location with Karen's mother. It was a wide, isolated stretch of land scattered with unfinished concrete structures. While searching the perimeter, investigators noticed several unfamiliar men standing off in the distance, watching every move the search team made. They didn't run. When detectives approached, it turned out these men were distant relatives of the Palomares family, guarding empty concrete buildings secured with heavy padlocks. Nothing of value inside any of them. Investigators believed these men were acting as lookouts, watching to see whether police would find what had been hidden there. The presence of multiple secured, empty structures guarded by relatives raised an unsettling possibility that this property might have been used for something like this before, long before Karen ever went missing. The search continued for days. Investigators worked the ground methodically, grid by grid. Everything looked completely undisturbed. Then, on May 31st, everything changed. Nadia, exhausted, physically and emotionally, was walking the field during yet another search when she lost her footing. Something made her stop right there. She insisted the team dig at that exact spot, even though nothing about the ground looked disturbed. The team got to work, more out of respect for her than any real expectation. At about 5 feet down, a shovel struck something solid. They found Karen. The mystery of what happened to her was finally solved. Now, all that was left was to piece together, minute by minute, exactly what happened behind those closed doors before that white pickup truck ever left for the countryside. To understand how this happened, we need to rewind to the morning of May 18th. Surveillance footage shows Karen walking through the front gate at 6:50 a.m., still in her pajamas. A car is already waiting outside. Behind the wheel, her supervisor, the same woman secretly involved with Jose Luis. Karen walks over, grabs a set of work keys from her, and heads back inside the property. She never actually leaves for work that day. Later that evening, around 5 or 6 p.m., Karen video calls her mother. She sounds completely calm. They talk about plans for dinner the next day. So, what happened in the hours after that call? The hours that changed everything? For a long time, investigators couldn't pin down a motive. The breakthrough only came once the case's sole eyewitness, 4-year-old Naeem, began sitting with child psychologists. Through drawings and carefully guided conversations, he revealed a disturbing secret the household had been hiding. Jose Luis's teenage nephew, Alexander, had allegedly been abusing Naeem repeatedly. That evening, Karen found out. Like any mother would, she went straight upstairs to confront her sister-in-law and mother-in-law, demanding answers. The confrontation turned physical fast. According to investigators, the women struck first. Karen didn't fight back. She shielded her son with her own body, begging them to let the two of them leave the room, pleading with them not to traumatize Naeem any further. The commotion brought the rest of the family upstairs. Investigators concluded that Jose Luis forced Karen to the floor and put her in a chokehold. Alexander joined in, delivering a hard kick while she was down. Jose Luis's father reportedly stood nearby and did nothing. His mother, Marta Beatriz, the psychologist, stayed in the room too, allegedly urging him to finish what he'd started. Later, Naeem's account lined up with the physical evidence in disturbing detail. Medical examiners found a deep bruise on Karen's hip, consistent with exactly what he described. After Karen stopped moving, the family turned to covering their tracks. They changed her out of her pajamas and into the striped blouse she normally wore during the day, staging the scene to make it look like she'd left for work. Then they waited for nightfall. Around 10 p.m., the men left in the white pickup truck, heading towards Xochimilco to prepare a burial site. Investigators believe they briefly met up with a second vehicle along the way, coordinating with other family members. By midnight, the truck was back at the house. Karen's body was loaded into the truck bed, and nearly the entire family climbed in with it, including Jose Luis's sister, who reportedly wanted to personally oversee the burial. The only one who stayed behind was Marta Beatriz, scrubbing the floors of the house. By 4:45 a.m. on May 19th, the truck pulled back into the garage. The family cleaned themselves up and went to bed like nothing had happened. Now, think back to that strange moment at the very beginning of this story, the scream Nadia heard over the phone that afternoon. How could Karen have screamed if she was already gone by then? The answer shows just how calculated this plan really was. Investigators believe that call was staged, that either Jose Luis's sister or Marta Beatriz herself called Nadia from an unknown number and faked a woman's scream. It was the final piece of the plan, meant to convince Karen's mother her daughter had been taken somewhere outside the home, sending investigators chasing a lead that never existed. On July 1st, 2022, the family made a fatal mistake. Marta Beatriz decided it was finally safe to resurface. Convinced she was in the clear, she brought Naeem to a government family services office, intending to file for legal guardianship of her grandson, believing the family's standing would outweigh any lingering suspicion. It's remarkable how overconfidence can blind even the most careful people. The moment she walked in, officers arrested her on the spot. That same day, Naeem was finally safe. He ran to Nadia in tears and said only one thing: "Thank you for saving me." What he later shared with child specialists, through drawings, through careful conversations, became some of the most powerful evidence in the entire case. The legal chapter of this story closed in December 2024. Prosecutors tried the case under Mexico's femicide statute, arguing multiple people had taken part. The standard maximum sentence for that charge is 70 years. But prosecutors proved two major aggravating factors. Karen and Jose Luis were legally married, and 4-year-old Naeem had been present during the attack. Those factors pushed the sentence far higher. Jose Luis received 105 years. His parents, found to have actively participated that night, were also convicted and handed lengthy sentences of their own. It might look like justice was fully served. It wasn't, not completely. 4 more people investigators say were involved that night are still on the run. Jose Luis's brother, his sister-in-law, and 2 relatives allegedly involved in coordinating the operation. Arrest warrants remain active. So far, none of them have been found. The one bright spot in this story is Naeem's life today. He's growing up surrounded by love, living with his grandmother Nadia. He swims competitively, does well in school, and brings home academic honors, just like his mother once did. To help him process what happened, the family held a small farewell ceremony for Karen. Naeem wrote her a short letter, telling her not to worry about him anymore, that he's safe now, and surrounded by people who love him. This case leaves behind one clear takeaway. No matter how carefully evidence gets buried, or how tightly people protect each other, none of it can stop someone determined to find the truth for the person they love. What do you think? Could investigators have caught this sooner? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if true crime cases like this one keep you hooked, make sure you're subscribed for the next documentary.